So how many websites do you subscribe to? I'm talking about websites that require a username and a password to authenticate and get into them, like Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Gmail, Yahoo, LinkedIn, your bank account, your 401k, etc., etc. Next question is, do you have a unique username and password for each? If you don't, I'm going to show you why you might want to reconsider. Every time you create a new account on a new site, you put a lot of faith into the administrators of that site and the workers at that company, and if it's a WordPress blog, just the owner of the site. You're giving them a lot of specific information about you, and it might seem kind of harmless, but it could be dangerous, especially if you're reusing passwords from site to site. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. I've put together here a fictitious login screen that essentially allows you to put the normal information you'd put. You put your name, your email address, and your really clever password. In this case, I've chosen Superman as my clever password. And I'm going to hit submit on that. And alright, so now it says new user added, and again, this is very simple, but I wanted to kind of show you the behind the scenes of what's going on when you hit that submit button. So we're looking at a database here. This is actually the database. So this is where all the users are stored, and a database is kind of like an Excel spreadsheet, but it has a lot of power that you can programmatically receive information from it and query data and so on and so forth. And so that's where your information is stored, in a database. And as you can see, Jon Snow has been added to the database with an email address and with his password. And here's the thing, right? If I'm using this password over and over, the site owner now has access to two very important tokens. My email address, which typically is the username that's used on many sites, and then of course it's got my password. I've given them essentially the keys to the kingdom. So if I'm lazy and I'm using this password for my bank account, it doesn't take much for the user to just grab this username and go to whatever bank, SunTrust or whatever, and put that username in there and just try your password and see if you were lazy. And if you were, well, now they have access to your account. That's a pretty scary thought. This is, by the way, called a password that's left in plain text format, meaning that if someone looks at the database, they can actually read what the password is. It wasn't encrypted in any form. It wasn't protected in any way. And so you might say, well, come on, I mean, nobody, the big companies that I deal with, they don't leave passwords in plain text. Here you go. Here's an example. Yahoo confirms theft of 450,000 unencrypted passwords. So that's an unencrypted. The one I showed you here, this is an unencrypted password. That's what it looks like. And Yahoo confirms that that happened to them last July. So it happens more frequently than you think. And when a password is left unencrypted like that, again, workers can see it. Obviously, there's hopefully you're assuming that the workers within the company are vetted to some degree and have security clearance to even access this database. But that's not always true. You have unethical employees. On top of that, people are hacking this all day long. There's people who just love to try to break into different people's sites and, big companies especially, and grab all the usernames and passwords, because that is a gold mine of information, because most people don't change their passwords, which is what I'm trying to show you here that you should be doing, why you should be doing it. I don't think people understand or realize or have this level of visibility into what's going on in the background and why they possibly should change their password. Okay, so let's assume then that the site that you're dealing with has some sort of protection. They encrypt your passwords. They don't just store them in plain text in your database. Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go here and I am going to add something called MD5 encryption. And MD5 encryption is this one-way encryption algorithm, and it takes your password, whatever you put in there. If you put in 3 characters, 10 characters, doesn't matter, it converts it to 128 bits, which is like this long character string of just random stuff that you cannot reverse engineer. Like having it doesn't help you any. And let's see what that looks like. So let's go back to our example. We're going to create a new account and we're going to say Jon Snow, I don't know, MD5, just to differentiate it, and hit submit. And remember, I just made the change to the code so that when I hit submit, it's going to actually encrypt this password. So what does it mean to be encrypted? Let's refresh our database. As you can see, our database has the original Jon Snow, but let's see what it looks like now with the new one. Okay, there you go. So now the first one was Superman in plain text. This one, forget about it. No one's going to crack that. I mean, that's an impossible password. It's not even recognizable to what you put in there. That's the Jon Snow MD5, remember? And so, you know, most sites will encrypt the passwords in the database for this exact reason, just in case the database gets into the wrong hands. And but let's keep something in mind. Two things actually. Number one is that here again is that Yahoo hackers published those 450 unencrypted passwords. But let's see, Twitter, hackers may have stolen passwords from 250,000 users, and I believe in this article the passwords were encrypted. We don't know what the encryption algorithm was, but they were encrypted. Here LinkedIn confirms and apologizes for stolen passwords, and I don't know how many they lost. A Russian hacker said he stole 6,458,020 encrypted passwords and posted them online without usernames just to prove that he did it. Evernote hacked. Almost 50 million passwords reset after security breach. So you see, even Evernote was hacked. Dropbox says spam tied to stolen passwords. Employee lists of user emails. Okay. So many examples, and all you have to do is do a Google search for, you know, stolen password or something like that on Google, and you'll see also plenty of articles on big name companies who've been hacked and had their passwords stolen. So if it's encrypted, again, it looks like this. That's great. You should be like, woo-wee! They used MD5 encryption. And again, I'm not going to go into the details of MD5 encryption, but it is one-way encryption. Meaning, again, having that, you can't figure out what the original password was because of the algorithm. It's like it takes your password and it puts it into a formula and pumps something out that you cannot reverse. So you should feel great if it's MD5 encrypted, right? I don't know. Let's take a look. I'm going to take this password and, you know, like I said, this password can't be reverse engineered, but every time Superman is converted to an MD5 hash, that's what this thing is called, an MD5 hash, it always produces this result. And so the interesting thing about that is that hackers have realized that, you know what if I take every word in the dictionary and I MD5 encrypt it? It'll always produce, you know, its corresponding unique hash or semi-unique. I believe they found that MD5 isn't exactly unique, but, you know, close enough. So with that said, so if they can do that, if they can take every word in the dictionary and team names and superheroes and so on and so forth and convert it to a to its MD5 hash, guess what? They've created the Rosetta Stone, right? They've created this one-to-one mapping. So even if they have just a simply MD5 hash string like this, it is easily, and I mean easily, reverse engineered. How easy? Let's take a look. Let's open up our Google, and let's just do a Google search. And guess what? Look at this. First one. Here's our MD5 hash, and look, Superman. So what's the takeaway here? The takeaway is that you need to be your own advocate when it comes to password security. You need to make sure that you're not only using a different password for each site, right? Because if you have a different password on each site, well, if somebody gets your username, which is, again, pretty much a constant, your username is going to be 95% of the time the same thing on every site you subscribe to. So by having a different password, at least if somebody steals that or even is unethical, the website owner is unethical and decides to try that password on different sites, well, it's not going to work because you don't use the same password on each site. And if it gets stolen, it's going to be useless. It'll be valuable for one site and invaluable to everything else. So that's one way to protect yourself. And the other way is to make sure that your passwords are of a sufficient length. Don't use like a 6-character password. You should have a minimum 8. I'd say, 12 to 14 is a good range of characters that should be in your password. They shouldn't be just, common words or names or teams. They should be, a mixture of uppercase, lowercase. You should have numbers embedded somewhere in them, not just at the end or the beginning, but mixed in there. And also use shift characters like exclamation points and, ampersands and whatever is allowed by the system. And if you do that, at least you prevent people from being able to, even if they have the MD5 hash, from reverse engineering it, because it's not going to be a common dictionary word. I'm going to show you one more thing here just for the sake of completeness. I'm going to change my code. I'm going to add something called assault. So this is more of an administrator thing at the administration level. But basically what I'm going to do is whatever your password is, I'm going to add these unique characters to the end of it before I encrypt it. So just in case you chose a really poor password, the hash that's generated should be, not so easily reversed. And obviously, as long as I keep this private and no one sees it, that will be a decent salt, I guess. So let's take a look at it. And so here you go. I'm going to create a new account, Jon Snow MD5 salt. And again, the password is still Superman. You're still putting in Superman. So I've created a new user. I'm going to refresh my database. Take a look at the users in it. And now, as you can see, we have the first one that was in plain text, the second one that was an MD5 hash, just straight up MD5 hash. And now this one I salted before creating the MD5 hash, and you can see the hashes are different. And how does that help you? When I do my little Google search, Google says I can't find anything. I hope this final example emphasized why it's important to have more complicated passwords. The password Superman, when hashed, created this 128-bit encrypted, gobbledygook that looked indecipherable, but we saw quickly how easy that was to reverse engineer using Google search. By taking Superman and adding some extra characters to the end of it, the salt example, and then converting that into a hash, the resulting hash is much more difficult. In fact, Google couldn't find anything like that because it was unique enough. So, remember to always have complicated passwords. At the end of the day, if you learned nothing else, the one thing you should remember is always create a unique password for every site you subscribe to. That's the best way to safeguard yourself from having all your accounts compromised if your password gets into the wrong hand.